The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speaker and are shared for general information purposes only. Any discussion of trends, forward-looking statements, insights, or statistics are based on the speaker's professional experience and information available at the time of recording and should not be relied upon as financial, legal, or commercial advice. Please refer to Grindr's website via the link in the episode notes for more information. Welcome to The Immersion, a podcast by Grindr's Coffee Roasters. So what is The Immersion? Well, The Immersion started about 4 years ago where we were looking for an opportunity to provide over and above support for our café customers. We've traditionally invited them to our roastery in Fairfield in Melbourne, where we've taken them around, given them a real sort of an immersive coffee experience. And now it's evolving into a podcast where we're looking for ways to meet our customers where they are and communicate more effectively with them. So the podcast is going to be short, practical conversations. Our aim is to grow our customers' businesses, help them build community and stay relevant in this changing cafe market. My name's Jono Goldthorpe. Let's dive into the first episode where we have Brendan Atkins. This episode is going to be all about 2026 cafe trends and what the landscape's looking like in 2026. Brendan works for Coca Cola Europacific Partners and he's the Customer Insights Manager. Brendan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? And if you don't tell us, I'm going to start asking questions about the Steve Smith lookalike.
Yeah, my name's Brendan Atkins. I've been with CCEP now for 4 years. Prior to that, I was working at Quantium with the Woolworths Rewards data set. So my job is all about data, insights, analytics. So a bit of a data nerd. Yes, I get the Steve Smith thing a lot. In fact, my nickname around the office is Smidge, so a smidge of smudge. But happy to have Steve Smith as my doppelganger. Really happy to be here today and talk about cafe trends.
Fantastic. And if we do run out of things to talk about, I don't envisage that happening, but your other hobby is improvised comedy as well.
Yes.
How did you get into that?
Well, to be honest, I've been doing speech and drama all my life. And then in high school kind of took an interest in theatre sports specifically. Have been performing improvised comedy since high school. So I love to think on the fly. And that's what this podcast is all about, I guess.
Yeah, very interesting. Comedy and then data, a bit of a juxtaposition there.
Yeah, it is. Look, when I talk about, my story into kind of data and analytics, it's funny because I actually dropped maths in high school. Didn't do maths for the HSC, did 4 units of English, big kind of drama, film, media kind of guy. But I think it gave me a leg up in the data and analytics world because at the end of the day, what people really connect with and how you can drive meaningful action is with strong storytelling. And that's what I really bring to kind of data and analytics. So it's not just numbers for me, it's how do we use those numbers to kind of tell a compelling story to drive meaningful action.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we've brought Brendan onto this very first episode of the Immersion podcast by Grindr's Coffee, because we really want to look at the shifts that are happening in the cafe market. Throughout the rest of the episodes, we're going to be deep diving into those trends with experts and cafe operators, but we've got some really good insights that Brendan's going to talk you through about what's actually driving those from a sort of consumer point of view, how people actually travel throughout the day, which in 2026, which is different to how it was several years ago. So it's a really good way to frame this series that we're going to dive into. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment. I'm not going to dive into what's happening, but the economy we're in for a wild ride in 2026. And even what we planned, what we were thinking it's going to look like a couple of weeks ago is going to be very different now, we think as well. So I'm going to start off. The great thing about these economic crises is that coffee is a non-negotiable ritual for people. And even through cost of living pressures and stuff, people still want to consume coffee. Brendan, can you share some data and sort of information about that? Yeah, what that's going to look like in 2026?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as I said on the way over here, I did a big State of the Nation report for CCEP only a month ago, and even now it feels a bit outdated with how fast things are moving from a global perspective. But the outlook for 2026 like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not looking great. We've got, rising inflationary pressures, and those inflationary pressures they're going to be sticky because, a lot to do with, now fuel costs, but you've also got service costs going up, housing costs going up. So, and a lot of those factors are sticky. So they're going to be around for a while. So you're kind of getting pushed from one angle with inflationary pressures and the costs of goods. And then on the other side, you've got kind of interest rates going up. And we just had another rate hike to 4.1%. So you're kind of getting squeezed by both sides. Things are costing more, but also you need to have a roof over your head, and that's costing more as well. And then to top it all off, our wage growth at the moment is below what the inflation is. So essentially, even though you might be earning more money, you're not earning more relative to how much everything is now costing. Right. So, yes, there's a reason to be, I guess, a little bit pessimistic about the economic outlook over the next 18 months. The silver lining for coffee and for beverages as a whole is that, the beverage category is quite resilient. When we've seen these kind of economic, this economic climate before, and I'd suggest probably we don't need to look that far back to find when the economy was in a state like this, probably around 2023.
Yep.
And when you think about 2023, what happened was we had COVID 2020, 2021. Then we had this resurgence in confidence in the economy in 2022. People going back out to cafés and stuff. You were stuck inside for 2 years. So we saw this big growth in 2022. Everyone was still getting JobKeeper, so there was still money going around. 2023, inflation goes up to 7%.
Yep.
The interest rates go up to 4.1%, which is about where we are now, right? So I would encourage people to kind of look back to 2023 and have a look at, what were the trading patterns back then, because it's probably going to be a similar outlook for 2026 and right up until kind of mid-2027. As I said, back in 2023, the good news for coffee and beverages is that it was resilient. We actually saw volume grow slightly. And when you have a look at some other categories that were in big decline, that was a win. Beverages as a whole is the 5th biggest category within the supermarket, and that's inclusive of coffee. We have a lot to go. Okay, it's not looking great, but at the same time, this category is resilient. So we do expect it to, push on through this next 18-month period.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think like a lot of the trends that we're going to talk through today were driven by that cost of living pressure through 2023. And if we're looking at that, sort of a repeat of that in 2026, I guess it just solidifies a lot of these trends to look out for again.
100%.
One thing we noticed through the changes recently is that how people consume their coffee. Traditionally, people have gone to cafes in the morning. The key time to consume coffee is that sort of 9 a.m. Say most coffee was consumed between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. in the morning. That is definitely still the case, but you've told me about some trends that seeing that throughout different parts of the day. We're definitely seeing that across many categories as well, whether that's cafe or convenience.
Yeah.
Can you share some insights into that as well?
Yeah, of course. The great thing about coffee is the breadth of occasions, right? So you've got obviously your morning ritual, which is really, really important, but then you might have the 10 o'clock, I just want to get out of the office and go for a walk coffee. You've got the afternoon, I need to pick me up or to treat myself. So there's a real breadth of occasions that we can tap into. We recently conducted a big consumer study, which obviously you are aware of, and we found that 20% of coffee occasions actually fall outside of that morning ritual. Right, so that's it's still a sizable chunk, 1/5 of your coffee occasions falling outside of the morning itself. I think as well, the other point I wanted to kind of touch on here was the idea of that hybrid working environment. That's obviously been here to stay over the last 6 years since we're kind of forced into it with COVID, and that's remained persistent. So about 36% of people are working from home across Australia. And that kind of changes the dynamics as well. And when we think about, cafes and getting coffee to our consumers, we really need to think about our food service aggregator strategy, right? I'll call it FSA for short. So they're like your Uber Eats, your menu logs, your things like that, because that's how, if you're not having a machine at home where you can make your barista-made coffee, that's how people are getting access to barista-made coffee. They're actually ordering it in, and sometimes in different formats as well. It doesn't need to be hot now. It can be in kind of a, frappe ice kind of format as well. So, the occasions are broad, and I think the way in which people are getting access to their coffee is shifting slightly as well.
Really interesting. I'll have to come back to that discussion around the food service aggregators and the cold coffee as well. I think that's a really good call out. There's a lot of different competitors for cafes at the moment. You mentioned before that home consumption, and we can see that home consumption is growing in coffee. I see also the things that are coming from that is customers' quality expectations as well, where they're making more coffee at home, they're buying more coffee from the supermarket and from cafes, and they're becoming more discerning about what they drink as well. So that's driving quality when they go out for cafes. But what other areas do you see competing with cafes as well for that share of the coffee market? And how's that changing the game in 2026?
Yeah, I think, given this economic climate, we need to think about our competitive set as cafes much broader, right? So I would be looking at, firstly, your convenience coffee. So whether you're going to 7-Eleven instead of going to a cafe, a little bit cheaper, a bit more convenient maybe. Your quick service restaurants. So heading into kind of your McDonald's or a Hungry Jack's to pick that up versus going to a cafe. So that's more of your kind of out and about. Absolutely. If we look at 2023 as a blueprint, we did see some of that spend shifting from, out of home consumption into at home consumption too. So I would expect that, to play a big role in 2026 as well. But even broader than that, when I think about a competitive set, it needs to anchor back into kind of the consumer needs, right? And when you think about coffee, when you boil it down, one of the most functional needs it delivers is an energy uplift, right? And so if you're thinking, I just need an energy uplift, then in a way, your cafe experience is also competing with other categories like energy drinks. I think that's particularly pertinent given this economic climate, that shift in competitive set.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it leads us straight into into the next topic that I wanted to talk about. The massive trend that we're seeing. It's been spoken about globally. We've had cafe chains in the US saying that 80% of their coffee beverage sales are iced now, which is pretty wild to think about. And we look at the coffee in the US, it gets a bad rap sometimes, but they do innovate a lot with what they do. So it's one to really, really watch, I think. Why do you think cold has become a core of the modern cafe?
Cold is just trendy, right? It's more stylish. But with the consumer research we've just done, we found 19%, so just shy of 20% of all coffees now in Australia are consumed cold. And that does seem to be up versus where it was, say, like 5 years ago. But what's really interesting with the cold thing specifically is when you then cut that by demographic. And it seems to be Gen Z consumers or younger millennials, they're the ones that are really over trading in this space. So when you have a look at the proportion of cold drinks that these younger consumers are versus the national average, they actually over trade in these cold drinks by a factor of 2 times, which is essentially like saying a younger consumer, a Gen Z consumer, is 2 times more likely to order a cold coffee when they visit your cafe versus a Gen X consumer.
Yeah, well, that is amazing. All this data is great. I just want to just make sure the listeners know that we're going to dive deeper into a lot of these trends in the following episodes of this podcast. So stay tuned. We're going to speak to some cafe operators on how they're utilizing these trends to help to grow their business as well. But you can really see the trends that are happening in cafes. And if we look at this data, it really just proves why these trends are working and why it's so important to have those long iced menus in
That's
your
right.
coffees. And then the same leading on to signature drinks as well. This is going to be something that's going to be heavily talked about in our next episode, which is all about driving foot traffic through marketing and social media and your cafe's brand. But what role do you see signature drinks in helping cafes stand out in the market?
It's funny when we talk to kind of signature drinks, because they obviously play a role in terms of branding, right? But I wanted to kind of reiterate the importance of getting the basics right as well, because at the end of the day, that the research that we've done, 40% of coffees consumed cappuccinos and lattes.
Yep.
Right? Yep. So it's like back to basics. If that's almost half of your sales, you got to make sure that you're nailing those two formats consistently before we then get into any kind of fancy signature drinks. Then when we do look at signature drinks, it is a good branding element, a branding executional element for cafes. Again, these signature drinks tend to overtrade with your younger consumers. So you're kind of future-proofing it. If you can get some kind of level of virality online from that being posted, you can drive more customers into your store, which is really, really important. So I think they play more of a role from a marketing perspective and driving that customer penetration into your store, which is really, really important. But yeah, that's not to say that, throw the kitchen sink at your signature drinks if you're not getting those base formats right, because that's where the repeat purchase is going to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're 100% right. It does definitely drive footfall into venues and perfect marketing tool. I think the great thing, though, about signature drinks is that it allows cafes to look at their actual cost of goods when they're building the drink and charge what they need to make a profit. Whereas I think at the moment, the way the cafe market is, cafes are picking the price of a latte and a cappuccino based on what their competitors are doing rather than what margin they need to survive.
Absolutely. If you can make a little bit more money on a signature drink, sell it. I think as well, it's you need to be cognizant of the demographic that you're of the area that you're serving, right? So our latest data that we get from CommBank, we have a look at the daily disposable income people. When we look at how much people spend on average, the average Australian, over a 4-week period, over 1 week period on eating out, it's about $80.50, right? So then when you're buying a drink that's worth $6, $7, $8, as a proportion of what that person has to spend in a week on eating out, if it's an $8 drink, that's 10%. And that's not including any lunch that they need to buy, any time they go out to the pub with their mates, So I think we just need to be cognizant of the areas. Yes, that might work in maybe more affluent areas and things like that. But if you're in kind of a lower socioeconomic area, particularly in this economic climate, then maybe your $8 signature drink, and I don't know if that's too much, I don't know, but maybe that's not actually going to drive the impact that you think it will.
Beautiful thing about a signature drink as well is it's that kind of the permissible indulgent drink where you're maybe potentially not getting those customers that are coming in every day or several times a week. It might be those ones that do only go out once a week, but when they do go out, they want to indulge in something a bit different to a standard latte. Or it might be a Gen Z that are really getting stuck into the iced beverages.
Right, particularly if they're still living at home, they're going to have more disposable income. If they're renting, it's going to be a lot harder. For sure.
And just circling back as well, you mentioned the food service aggregators and the iced beverages as well.
Yeah.
So one chat I had with Brendan earlier was food service aggregators looking at things like signature beverages and bundling your meals, what you're putting onto your Uber Eats and the likes with a cold beverage, because it is going to travel better. Potentially higher margins as well. So I thought that was a great call out.
With cold and signature, right? So FSA as an industry, it's a $10 billion industry now in Australia, food service aggregators. So it's huge. The stunning thing about food service aggregators is when we have a look at the customer penetration across Australia, it's only at 40%. 40%. So there's a huge headroom to grow. When you look at things like, cafés and supermarkets, they're all, 80 plus, 85 plus, right? So, massive headroom for growth in food service aggregators. And when we look at the formats that overtrade, again, versus your in-store consumers versus ordering, it's your colder formats. And I don't know if that's just a perception thing that they do travel better, as you said. And when you're ordering through an Uber Eats or a menu log, for whatever reason, consumers just feel richer, right? The online baskets are bigger. They're bigger and they're more expensive. They're willing to pay a premium. So if you can make a little bit more margin off that, absolutely, it's core to have that FSA strategy. When we talk about meals, it's interesting because we found in that consumer study 63% of coffee is consumed with a meal. So meals are obviously a really big part of that coffee occasion as well. Over half of the occasions with food of some kind. We've done a lot of work with meals across our business in CCEP. And we do find it's when you're doing kind of a meal bundle, you get a lot more engagement when you give it a total price. Hey, get you a toast and a coffee for X amount of dollars. Rather than have them as separate items on the menu or have like an ad for $2. Have that whole price there so people know what they're getting into and what they're getting out of it as well.
Yeah, it's a really good call. I think people just want to know what they're spending at the moment because they do need to think about what they're spending. And the meal bundling as well, that's really interesting because I remember I've been with Graders for quite a while, in the coffee industry for quite a while, and looking at venues and cafes, usually that meal bundling was more for your quick service, grab and go kind of food places, and it was a bit daggy. Like I wouldn't walk into a cafe that we supply to and propose they do a meal bundle. Where you're seeing it a lot more now. I was at a really cool cafe in Adelaide recently. Really trendy place, beautiful food, coffee. It was really cool to see. They were doing like a promo at 10 o'clock in the morning. I think it was like 10 to 11, the new happy hour maybe, and doing you get this sort of breakfast burger with the sides and with a drink on the side as well, and that could be iced. They were doing iced hot, everything. But it's interesting seeing that daggy meal bundle going into sort of more premium cafes and venues.
Yeah, because I think traditionally it's been associated with more of that petrol and convenience kind of thing, grab your donut and a coffee or whatever. But it is coming more into kind of your cafe space. I think the good rule of thumb with meal bundling is make it easier for people to opt in than it is to opt out. Right? And if you're bundling it together, it's very easy to opt in. Okay, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get the drink. Don't give people an out to go, actually, I'm not going to get the drink, right? I can get these two things. It's $10, it's $15. Perfect. Done.
Yeah. And like back to this one, I got it wasn't super cheap, but it was slightly cheaper than buying all the items separately. And it was just, I had to do it. It was really good.
Yeah, you got to do it. And that's value. And that's the thing I think in 2026, my challenge to everyone really is think really hard about what is value, because people are going to be seeking value. I think there's this misconception that value is just making things cheaper, but that's trading down or that's devaluing a category sometimes. Value means different things to different people, and value can mean different things in different channels as well. Like it's hard to define value. So in this case, when you're bundling kind of your coffee with a really nice meal, even though it's a little bit more expensive from an absolute price point, people see the value in that bundle, right? So if we are able to showcase and illustrate value to our consumers, you're going to win in 2026.
Yeah, I'm going to change tact a little bit now. Another trend that I'm seeing a lot in the market is experience and customer service, and the growth of experience and customer service. Actually seeing a little bit of a split, and when you look at sort of restaurant data, this kind of validates it, where fine dining's performing quite well. It's in modest growth, but the thing that's in real growth is quick service restaurants. That tells me that people want an experience or they want convenience. So we're seeing in cafes, you're being greeted, seated as you walked in the door. It's been happening for quite a few years now, but I can really see cafes leaning into that a lot more, providing a real sort of customer experience. To sort of combat that that growth in quick service and convenience where they get the better value. I think when people go out to treat themselves for coffee, breakfast, that kind of stuff, they want that exceptional experience. Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to experience and driving that return customers, right? Because ultimately that's what you're wanting to drive by offering that experience. You want people coming back. And it's really funny in coffee because coffee consumers there's an inherent loyalty with them. That recent consumer study we conducted, 19% of people will go back to the same place.
Yeah.
That they just have to try the coffee once and then they'll come back to the same place and they'll order the same thing. So it's really funny. There's this inherent loyal nature to coffee consumers if they like that original experience. Now, yes, all of that micro hospitality stuff can help elevate that experience for sure. But what we found is the two biggest features that people are looking for when they're going out for their coffee is they're looking at quality of the product.
Yeah.
And the second is affordable price.
Yep.
Now, it's hard for those two things to be number one and number two because there's a inherent tension between them. Obviously, the better quality, the more expensive it is.
Yep.
Right? The cheaper it is, the worse the quality. So you've really got to find this balance between those two features because ultimately those are the two biggest drivers of getting people in. And once people are in, well, at least 1/5 of them are just going to keep coming back naturally, right? So I don't think you really need to try too hard to get that repeat purchase if you're offering good value and you're offering good quality, right? So then it becomes, how do we drive penetration? That's the real question. How do we actually get people in the first place?
Yep.
Offer them a good experience, good value. They're going to keep coming back.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that data as well, and I know that they kind of contradict each other, that quality versus value. And the thing that people probably don't talk about going to a cafe because it makes them feel good, because it's hard for them to admit that or to think about it. They go there because they think it tastes great or they think it's really good value, but they probably go also because they love having a chat with the barista or the manager on duty as well.
It was really funny in that study because, we had a bunch of functional benefits for the category. And then we also had a long list of emotional benefits. And in most other channels, coffee over-indexed with the functional benefits. Functional as in it gives me an energy uplift, those pragmatic kind of things of the coffee occasion. When it came to barista-made coffee, it had a much stronger positive association with a lot of emotional benefits. Those emotional benefits being it helps me connect with other people. It helps me have a sense of community and being part of a community. So those things massively, over-correlated, I would say, had that strong positive association with those barista-led occasions. So that's really the sweet spot for cafes that's the unique selling point, versus having your coffee at home or getting a coffee at a QSR or a petrol station. It's those emotional needs that we're satisfying.
It's really interesting. And I think we'll come back to that in a future episode. We've got to talk about automation and equipment in coffee and seeing changes in that part of the industry as well, where both the sort of premium and QSR sort of more convenience ends of the market are going towards more automation, whereas the sort of especially premium venues are doing it so they can connect with the customers more and have that emotional connection. And the QSR style venues are doing it more for a convenience point of view. So I mean, there's nothing in the world, and I don't know, maybe this is just a me thing, than going into your cafe and having the barista know your order already. Yep. You know what I mean? They don't even need to ask for your name. There's just something about that. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Usual, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to ask that question next time in the consumer research. We'll have to add that in. Another thing we're seeing is a sense of community in a venue. So a lot of the listeners to this podcast are going to be sort of a local community cafe, which we're seeing some really great trends pop up around cafes doing things like starting run clubs, having sort of local dinners or local nights, themed dinners, makers markets, and all these little small local events that build emotional loyalty with their customers. Can you suggest any sort of insights into that trend?
Yeah, well, as I was saying before, like community is one of those emotional needs. Like a sense of community is an emotional need for somebody. And barista-made coffee, those occasions have a positive association with that sense of, it gives me a sense of community.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of community when I'm there. So it's absolutely the right space to play in. I think my one watch out is there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Yeah.
Really what it comes down to is if you're going to execute on that aspect of community, it needs to be personal and it needs to be local.
Yeah.
Right? What is going to resonate with your particular community? Because you can't just take the idea of the run club, which is a great idea, and stick that everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in Sydney around the Bay Run area, that might work, right? You've got a nice area where people probably are already running. It's affluent kind of area. So you've got kind of the right demographics there. Versus, if you're way out west in Sydney, maybe that doesn't work as well for your community. Maybe that's more around food and food pairings, or however you execute that. So, yeah, community is definitely important, and we see that in the data. How you execute on that sense of community really needs to be local. And that comes down to, applying a data-led approach.
The data in the local community, but also knowing your venue and your brand, essentially, the identity of your venue and what's going to work there. When we're lucky to live in a time where data is so accessible for customers to find all this out. You mentioned something about a great source for cafe owners to find out all this information.
Well, we're so lucky in Australia because we have a lot of data that people can access for free through literally the ABS website, so Australian Bureau of Statistics. So they can look up their postcode, like you can get postcode level data, find your postcode, understand, what is the proportion of what is the socioeconomic index for my area. And that's a really simple metric to go. It's between 1 and 10.
Yeah.
10, okay, I'm in a very affluent area. 1, I'm in the least affluent area. You can have a look at demographics like, gender, Australian-born population, all of these kind of things, ethnic mix-up, like all of these demographic signals can inform your strategy in terms of how you approach that. And that's all free.
Yeah.
And that can't be said for countries like New Zealand where you can't actually access that stuff for free. So I would really encourage everyone to, and if you don't have the time, the great thing is we've got, platform AI, right, is now a big thing. You can actually just put the prompt into ChatGPT if you want and just go, hey, using the ABS as a source, give me a breakdown of the demographics of my area. My postcode is XYZ.
Yeah.
And you'll get a nice little summary. So, at a very least, that's a 5-minute task. And all of a sudden you are a lot more informed about your area. And you can start making data-led decisions. I was saying before, like your gut decision-making, it's actually surprisingly, pretty good.
Yeah.
If you're trusting your gut.
Yeah.
But every so often it's not.
Yeah.
And you can get a bum steer. And that's where data is really, really important because you can validate that gut feeling and understand sometimes where your gut might be a little bit off.
Yeah, I think that's a really great tip. And yes, absolutely, by any means, go and type into ChatGPT current trends. This is my postcode. What should I look at? But go with your gut. You know your venue better than anyone else.
Absolutely.
Cool. So it was a really good chat.
Yeah.
Brendan, can you share any ideas you've got for quick wins that could have a fast impact? So if you had a cafe and you could make 2 or 3 changes tomorrow, what would you look at first?
I think probably anchor it back into 3 pillars that have kind of been persistent throughout our conversation today. Number 1, making sure I have a really strong and distinct online strategy, whether that be direct if I'm big enough, or partnering with your food service aggregator partners. right? That is imperative, particularly in this economic climate, and particularly given the over index through that channel with your younger consumers. So it really future proofs you if you can have that strategy. The second point would be around holistic meals, right? So as I said before, more than half of coffee occasions are consumed with food.
Yeah.
So how are we executing meals and snacks, those kind of occasions with coffee? I think that's really, really important, particularly when we think about value and not devaluing the category, but actually driving value by adding more on, right? Driving higher baskets. So meals is really important. And then the last point there is just around targeting, right? And that's kind of what we were just talking about with making sure that the decisions that we're making are data backed. Really having an intimate understanding of the demographics of my area, what overtrades in my particular store, what's working, what's not. Go back and actually reconcile. Look at the data through your own till. It's we're now living in a data age. So if you're not using data in your business decision making, you will fall behind. So that's more of a cultural thing than like something that you can just quickly pick up, but it's definitely something, and I have a natural bias to talk about data, but definitely something that I would be implementing, and you will see the commercial benefit from that.
Yeah, really cool. Thank you, Brendan. So once again, that was Brendan. Brendan is the Customer Insights Manager for CCEP, and he's also does improvised comedy. So go and check out your show. What's your show called again?
I just finished performing at Adelaide Fringe. We did a show called A Kingdom of Fools.
Yes.
We'll be rerunning that in Sydney this September.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely check that out.
I will definitely check that out.
Little personal plug.
Yeah, why not? Why not? So thank you. Thank you so much again for coming on, Brendan. In our next episode, we're going to talk with Kieran Spiteri and Mirko Bonmassa. We're going to talk about cafe branding, a little bit about social media, and how you can give your customers a great experience in store and make sure they come back. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to follow us, share it with your friends, share it with other cafe owners, and we will see you for the next episode.